If you think you could never be vegan, you're in the right place. If you think there's something big that you would really like to do, but it's probably too late, you're in the right place. My name is Michelle Olander. I think there's never been a more important time to move in a vegan direction. So I'm here every week to support you, offer actionable strategies, and cheer you on as you veg your best. Episode 171, The Crisis in Our Closets, with Alden Wicker. Welcome back, my Veg Your Besties. How's it going? Anyone feeling, overwhelmed? Just me? So, I wrestled with publishing this interview with today's guest right now at a time when some of you may be feeling a bit overwhelmed right along with me. But then I thought, well, maybe I'm just projecting. Maybe you guys are all fine. So in some ways, I think it might actually be the perfect time to take 30 minutes or so to listen to today's guest, journalist and author, Alden Wicker. Listen to Alden here today before you buy another item for you or someone you love. Alden Wicker is the founder and the editor-in-chief of ecocult.com. That's ECOCULT, ecocult.com. And that's a website dedicated to helping consumers learn about the many hidden toxins, environmental and health concerns in the clothes, the fabrics, and the materials that we live, sleep, and sweat in. I mean, literally, a crisis in our closets. A journalist and author, Alden Wicker has done extensive research into fashion and sustainability, and Alden writes about why we should care about fast fashion, what ethical fashion even means, and how we as individual consumers can make more environmentally responsible choices without thinking it's all up to us to fix. In her new book, To Die For, How Toxic Fashion is Making Us Sick and How We Can Fight Back, Alden addresses the hidden dangers of the fashion industry, particularly focusing on the toxic chemicals in most of the clothing that we have access to. The book was released in June of this year, and it has in many ways been likened to Rachel Carson's A Silent Spring for the Wardrobe. It's an expose of the largely unregulated and in many cases harmful chemicals in our clothing, and the rise in various health issues like autoimmune diseases, infertility, asthma, eczema, and conditions like multiple chemical sensitivities. So far from being a downer, I actually think you're going to be riveted by Alden's work and her knowledge and what she's putting into the world. So don't be overwhelmed. Don't be overwhelmed. Just listen. Knowledge is power. And I'll catch you on the other side. Alden Wicker, journalist, author of To Die For, DYE. Welcome to Veg Your Best.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's a delight. I learned about you not that long ago, and I kind of debated with myself whether you would like to be on the podcast, whether it would work for you, and whether it would be interesting for my clients and my listeners. And I'm for sure thinking yes, because I just told you when I went vegan, one of the main realizations for me was like, oh my gosh, what else am I not seeing? And so when I saw your work, your book, To Die For, DYE, I'm going to say it again, about toxicity in fashion and in clothing, I was like, oh, wow, I need to know all about that. So tell us, Alden, tell us a little bit about what brought you to the journalistic magnum opus that is To Die For.
Yeah. Thank you for all those kind words. So I've been writing about fashion sustainability, as well as ethics for over a decade now, both freelance for places like New York Times and Wired and Vogue, but also for my own website, ecocult.com. And I had been writing a lot about the toxins that are in things like cleaning products and beauty products, right? Like we all know about clean beauty. But fashion was sort of set apart from that because it was like, oh, well, you don't eat your clothing. This is something that you should care about because it's affecting garment workers or these rivers. But it was all sort of over there, right? Affecting people on the other side of the world in Bangladesh or Morocco or Ethiopia. And so that was kind of the view I had about it. And in 2019, a radio show got in touch and they said, we would love for you to come on the show and comment and tell us a little bit about why Delta Airlines attendants are suing Land's End, who made their uniforms, because they said their uniforms were making them sick. And the reactions that they were having were horrifying. So it would start with a rash that would become so bad that it would bleed. Also coughing, crusty eyes and blurry vision. Some flight attendants started losing their hair. Some went bald. Some of them had to be taken off the plane and taken to the ER for various allergic reactions. Some would have racing hearts or become so fatigued that they couldn't, even get up the stairs when they got to the airport. And so this wasn't just happening at Delta, as I found out. It first happened at Alaska Airlines when they introduced new uniforms. Then it happened at American Airlines. And then it happened at Southwest. And it's still happening at Southwest. Southwest has not switched out the uniforms the way these three other major airlines have. So when I got that invitation, I actually declined because I didn't know what was going on. I'd never heard of fashion, A, having toxic chemicals, B, having such toxic or hazardous chemicals that it could make you sick. And so that set me off on this journey. And 4 years later, and it culminated with the publication of my book, where, I was looking at, okay, so what happened with these uniforms, but also if these mostly women, some gay flight attendants are having such horrendous, acute, clearly linked to the uniforms reactions, what's happening to the rest of us? Is this something that we need to be concerned about, just regular you and I? And the answer is yes, it is happening to the rest of us in ways large and small, linked to acute reactions, dermatitis, rashes, eczema, but also chronic health issues like cancer, autoimmune disease, allergies, asthma, all of these different things that sort of mysteriously have been going up. I have air quotes, mysteriously have been going up in the general population, especially in women in the United States and around the world. So that's how I got to this point where my focus is really on this extremely undercovered and hidden part of the fashion industry, which is what is happening over there in Bangladesh, in India, in China, is affecting us over here when we buy these pieces of clothing.
Well, and reading your book is just amazing that you were able to find out what you were able to find out, because it is actually very hidden. It is almost impossible, right, to find out exactly what chemicals we are putting on our bodies through our clothing.
It is. It's kind of crazy when you think about it, because when you pick up a cleaning product or you pick up a beauty product or a food product, there is a long list of everything that is in that product. And when you pick up a piece of clothing or a pair of shoes and you look at the label only has the fabric content. Anything that's under 5% is not required to be listed in that product. 5% is a huge amount when you're talking about substances that can have an effect on your health at parts per million, parts per billion levels. So even if you somehow find out, and there are ways to find out, a lot of people don't know about them. A lot of doctors don't know to look for this. But if you find out that you're allergic to nickel, formaldehyde, dispersed dye blue, dispersed dye black, other intermediate substances that are used to dye clothing, there's no way to find for sure clothing that doesn't have those substances in it because they are just not labeled.
And they're hard to remember. The words themselves are not accessible words, right? They're not things that we're going to go, oh yeah, that's right. I don't want those letters, that collection of letters that you just said, right?
Yeah, like, oh, 1,4-dioxane for sure. But some of them we do know, and yet they're finding their way on our clothing, and they're not labeled. They're accidental contaminants, or they're just not, like, they're not tested for. So we know that mercury is a heavy metal that's bad for us. That's been found in clothing. Arsenic, phthalates, BPA, and other bisphenols, which are endocrine disruptors, hormone disrupting chemicals. Chromium, we know that's bad. PFAS. PFAS, some people are aware of it, some people are not. It's been in the news lately. For listeners who aren't aware, PFAS, PFAS is what it's called, is a class of extremely toxic chemicals that are used in clothing for water and stain repellency, sometimes like quick dry properties. And they've been definitively linked to various types of cancer, reproductive harms, birth defects, immune suppression, obesity, basically cancer and anything that's regulated by your hormonal system, essentially. And
that's one of those forever chemicals, right?
Forever chemicals. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Forever chemicals, because they just never go away. Mm-hmm. They accumulate in our bodies. They accumulate in the environment. They accumulate in the Arctic, in Arctic animals. They're extremely hazardous. There have been some lawsuits around these, in the drinking water, but also thanks the period panty brand, this year settled a $5 million lawsuit because PFAS was in high amounts in its period panties, which was found by a researcher in Notre Dame. And we don't want that down there in our most intimate area. It's a special irony that, like, women are so concerned at this point around healthy hormonal regulation and all the reproductive harms that we suffer around painful periods, endometriosis and everything. And then it's on our period panties.
No, in this vascular, warm place close up to us where some people may not realize how many medications we do take now through dermal patches. Different people have different dermal, because it is an area of our bodies that is absorbing all the time. It's absorbing whatever's on it. And it is, I think we kind of think our skin's this like exterior.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And there was research that actually this isn't in the book because this just came out a couple of weeks ago, where a researcher was looking at what happens when we sweat, especially in synthetic fabrics that have hazardous finishes in them. And that sweat draws those hazardous substances out of the fabric and deposits it on our skin. This research was specifically looking at flame retardants, and flame retardants, this is the one bright spot. Flame retardants aren't in normal, non-professional, non-performance safety clothing. Just, it used to be in children's pajamas a while ago, but it's not anymore, thank God. But this research shows that sweat is a really effective way to get whatever's on and in synthetic clothing and other fabrics onto your skin. And from there, it can be absorbed into your blood, depending on what chemical it is and how much it is.
Well, so this all sounds like just dreadful news, and everybody's going to want to just shut this off and put their hands over their ears and go, no, what am I supposed to do about it at all? And some of the interesting things I read, and then I heard you talking to other people about, and on your website, ecocult.com, there's so much information, but it is, why should we sit and take it in a little bit, because it does sound like a lot of unremittingly bad news.
Yes. So I don't want to scare people. I don't want to put another thing on everyone's plate. Like, you know, all the to-dos that we have for our health, like make sure you meditate every morning, and also like, you know, do this and do that, and only wooden toys for your kids, like not too much screen time and all this stuff. But it's actually meant to be, this information is meant to be empowering. And the reason why I say that is because it was so interesting. As I was researching and publishing this book, people would say like, what are you working on? Oh, I'm working on this book. It's about toxic chemicals in clothing. And I would tell them a little bit about just a little bit of the research. And they would say, oh, I had a reaction to clothing, and I didn't know what it was because like nobody had ever told me that this could happen before, this was possible. And like, now I know, or, you know, my sister can't do scented products, and like she has a reaction when she puts on polyester clothing, and I didn't understand why. And there's just, so like 1 in 5 people are sensitive to chemicals in their environment and scented products. It looks like, you know, that number keeps coming up for people who also suffer a variety of other chronic health issues. And that's a lot of people that I think it's an issue that's really, really highly undercovered. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And so if you're somebody who has skin problems, and I'm saying like eczema or rashes or like occasionally hives mysteriously coming out of nowhere, or even if you break out on your body, like if you have back knee or butt knee, I'm telling you that like, even if you've tried everything, which a lot of people have, right? They've cut out dairy, which benefited me. I cut out dairy, and like that made my skin a lot better, talking from a personal perspective. But have you tried switching out your clothing to natural fibers? Because that could be the thing. That could be the final key to unlock better health for you, or reduce the amount of chronic health issues or reactions that you're having. And it can be really hard to make that connection, because a lot of times, okay, first of all, again, nobody's told us that this is a thing, right? So if you go to your dermatologist and you say, I'm having terrible skin issues, they'll say, what soaps are you using? What lotions are you using? What detergents are you using? What cleaning products are you using? But they're not going to say, what are you wearing? And I know this is true because I spoke to a group of doctors who said, yeah, we heard you on the radio and you're right. We're not asking, come tell us about it. Like what's going on here? And then the other thing is, I've heard from, this is all anecdotal, but I've heard from a lot of people who figured out it was their clothing, that the rashes appear 3 days later. So you put on an offensive piece of clothing, and 3 days later you develop a rash. And so it's kind of hard to like connect it to that thing. So it's kind of like, you know, you if you go on an elimination diet for your health, and you cut out everything and then you start adding things back in. I inadvertently did that for myself, because I mean, it started like 5 years ago, right? I realized that I was extremely uncomfortable if I wore synthetic yoga leggings on a long flight. I'd be like, oh, I'm really itchy, you know? And I had like breakouts on my backside for my whole life. And I thought, oh, it's ingrown hairs or like whatever. I don't know. It's just a condition of being a human. And so I started buying 95+% cotton leggings to wear when I travel. And then I just kept buying more and more natural fiber clothing because, you know, I blog and write about fashion sustainability. It just seemed like the natural thing to do. And I was like, you know, this just feels better. Like, I just like it more. It's like more comfortable. And then, pandemic hits, I stopped wearing tights. Like, I was like, I never want to wear a pair of tights in cold weather ever again. And, in the past year, I've worn a pair of synthetic leggings to hot yoga, and that night, huge pimple on my butt, like enormous pimple. And then I was like, that's weird. Maybe. And I was like thinking, and I was like, why today? And I was like, oh, okay, maybe it's that. But, you know, one data point, not a study.
Right. No proof.
Yeah. And then like a month ago, I put on a pair of black nylon tights for the first time in a long time. And that night, again, another pimple, right? Like huge on my butt. And I know this is TMI, but I was like, oh, okay. Like this is my elimination diet. Like I'm adding synthetics back in, especially black, and especially performance gear. And I'm noticing that I'm having a reaction to it. And before this, I thought I'm a really healthy person. Like I really feel a lot of empathy for all of the women and some men that I've interviewed that have problems with reacting to clothing. And, but I was like, this isn't something that really affects me. And I'm realizing, yes, it is affecting me in a more subtle way, in a more manageable way. But often in all these stories that I hear, the skin is the first warning sign that your body is like, I do not like this. I do not want this around me. And then if you don't address that, if you don't honor what your body's telling you, it spreads.
And I think so many of us who have a child, a grandchild, a friend who's had chronic dermatitis, this kind of nonspecific dermatitis, we've often been told to look at our stress and at our emotional state.
Are you sure you're not just anxious?
Yeah.
You know,
which does exist. It is a thing. It is a thing. But, sometimes along with that concern about our stress and our anxiety might be what we're rubbing up against for hours a day. Even sheets and our bedding and these sorts of things have all you were talking about the chemicals that are used for wrinkle resistance.
Yes. Do not buy wrinkle-free sheets. I mean, first of all, don't buy synthetic sheets. I don't even know why you would subject your skin to that. Like it's silly. But like I am now a deep fan of the look of artfully wrinkled farmhousey bedding because as much as I appreciate when I visit my mom and she freshly irons the sheets for me, it's really kind of her. I would not recommend that. I mean, you are wrapping yourself in that envelope, and I don't know about you, but I sweat when I at various points of the night. So it's really important, especially for your sheets, and your underwear, that you're being really thoughtful about where you purchase those items.
Yeah, I know. And I just think that it's something we may, people I talk to, I know have been concerned about fast fashion, about the low quality and ease of it going into our waste stream so quickly, and that it's created not by robots, but by people, sometimes prisoners, sometimes children, sometimes people with very, very harsh, poor conditions. And it's even more as you're saying, it's closer than that. It's not just us being concerned about what somebody else is going through, but what they are going through is even worse than we thought, because they're breathing in these fibers, right? They're breathing in these toxins and these chemicals and these additives.
Yeah, they are. I mean, I did visit Tirupur in India and sit with some garment workers, and one of them showed me these horrendous rashes. She had scars on her arms from developing skin problems from working in a synthetic clothing factory for the domestic market. So yeah, they go through much more than us, but those same chemicals they're staying on our clothing. They don't just evaporate into thin air once they leave the factory. They're there. And some of them are deliberately applied. Some of them are accidental contaminants, things like pesticides that have been banned in the United States for use and sale since the 80s are still being used elsewhere, in the warehouse or in the ship where the clothing is shipped over to us. So there are so many points in this extremely complicated supply chain where these chemicals are deliberately or accidentally applied to the clothing. And more chemicals are used to strip them off. And there's chemicals to lubricate the machinery and antifungals and dyes and all of these different things. And they're layered on top of each other. So it's not just the formaldehyde. It's how the formaldehyde might react with the azo dyes and the these like scouring agents that are also applied, and all of these different things, and how some of them work on the same organs or have the same health effects, and they might have synergies where they multiply each other's effects. Clothing has some of the most complicated chemistry of anything we can buy.
And some of these chemicals are, well, many of them are also on the natural fibers. So if we go, well, I always buy cotton, I always buy silk, I always buy wool. If you're not vegan and you still buy wool, those materials too also are treated, are connected with all these dyes and preservatives and cleansers and surfactants to change the texture of them. It's amazing.
Yeah, I will say that like synthetic fibers are riskier than natural fibers, right? So when I talk about the different ways you can reduce your exposure, which I'm sure we'll talk about, you have to combine all these things because there's no hard and fast rule. There's no, certification that covers everything. There's no perfect certification. Natural fibers can have a lot of these things put on them. They tend to be safer. But another thing that I think is really important for your audience to know is there has been a lot of cynical exploitation of the very passionate vegan fashion community to sell extremely toxic synthetic materials that are very cheap for a markup. So when I'm talking about things that are labeled as vegan leather, often those are PVC, especially if they're very cheap. PVC is the most toxic plastic on the market. It has vinyl chloride. That's the vinyl chloride and the polyvinyl chloride. And vinyl chloride will off gas from the PVC over the full lifetime of the product. So, and vinyl chloride, if people don't know some context, vinyl chloride is a chemical that was in the Ohio train derailment this summer. And it's just extremely toxic. And then, they burned it off and it created dioxane and all these things. So it's not good. Also, PVC tends to contain the plasticizer phthalate, or a type of phthalate. And phthalate is a hormone disrupting chemical. So that means it is interrupting all of the processes of your body that are governed by hormones. So not just your reproductive system and your period, but like also the development and growth of your children, future children, fertility, as well as your energy levels, your weight, your brain function, your skin appearance. All of these different things can be affected. So if you see a very, very cheap vegan leather from a brand that does not have a good reputation or any reputation at all, right? If it's an ultra fast fashion brand, I would be very, very wary of purchasing that product. The other types of vegan leathers are almost all involve polyurethane. So polyurethane is much safer than PVC. It's still a plastic. It can still contain plasticizers. But there's a lot of sort of like plant-based vegan leathers that still contain polyurethane in very large, like the majority of it is polyurethane, and then they sort of sprinkle in some like cactus or whatever. And some of these vegan leathers have been tested and found to have hazardous chemicals, hazardous and restricted substances in them. So it really annoys me that people's compassion and passion for trying to live in a better way is being exploited by some people to sell them cheap and toxic materials.
I'm grateful you brought that up, because it is as the old movie says, it is a puzzlement. And then some people will try to buy vintage. For me, at my age, I just try to keep everything I already have. This is my one thing. I'm like, because I've tried to. There was a cork purse maker that I was trying to communicate with them. I said, "Is it just cork, or do you like mix the cork into a slurry?" Or it's just, and I could not get an answer. To me, if you can't get an answer, we just need to assume that it's not something I'm going to want to hear. And they're just, it's possible the person who owns the company doesn't really know.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of entrepreneurs who just want to make a good product and they're not chemists, and that's okay.
They just don't know how to answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Cork is usually pretty good. It's usually just cork with a fabric backing. So no problem there.
That's good to know.
But all of the plant-based leathers, almost all, there's one exception, which is Mirum by Natural Fiber Welding. That is 100% bio-based, vegan product. I have a couple things with it. It's great. Love it. Love the founder. Awesome. Super transparent. Made in America. All the things. All the rest of the plant-based leathers, the mushroom leather you've heard of, all those different things, it's just mostly polyurethane with some plant inserted.
Yeah. And that's very discouraging, because there's a lot of money and a lot of people really, as you're saying, trying to do the right thing, trying to do something that's in alignment with them, but that can't possibly be in alignment with some kind of a chemical like that, which is just going to have such endless effects on our environment. I mean, one of the main reason I think, especially young people, are coming to vegan choices is the environment, is concern about the pollution. So I think we've brought up a lot of the issues. There are so many more in To Die For and on your website, ecocult.com. But let's talk a little bit about what we can reasonably, like from today during our holiday period, people who have kids and friends and might want to buy a gift of clothing. What's a couple things they could keep in mind, pro and con, this season as they're purchasing things?
Absolutely. So the first thing I would say is never buy ultra fast fashion. When I say ultra fast fashion, I mean those brands on Amazon or Temu or on TikTok or Instagram. You've never heard of them before. They have weird names of different words smushed together.
Seen them. I've seen them.
Everybody's seen them. If they're not even good value, you order them. Turns out they look nothing like the picture. They're terrible quality. They don't have, when you try to return it, they don't answer. These types of brands are very dangerous. There's nobody looking out to make sure that they are safe. So the reason why I say ultra fast fashion brands, there are fast fashion brands that have extremely good chemical management programs. H&M is one of them. Vans is another one. Zara. These are all fairly affordable. Hanes. There's Levi's. We have a whole list on EcoCult of the safest affordable brands, and that you can just get at the mall. And they spend millions of dollars testing things. They work closely with their suppliers in trustworthy partnerships. They're doing a lot. They're concerned, and they're making sure that toxic products aren't making it onto the shelves. If you order from a brand that you've never heard of and that is the cheapest possible thing, I guarantee you they do not care. And that means the factories don't care either. And contaminants are sneaking into your products. And it could be, it's just really dangerous. So that's my first thing. Like I said, natural fibers tend to be safer than synthetic fibers. Avoid performance products and marketing promises. So if it promises to be anti-wrinkle, anti-odor, quick dry, especially stain repellent, water repellent, if it's a fabric that has a trademark name, not only is it probably achieved with a hazardous finish, they're probably upcharging you just because of this like performance thing that might not actually benefit you at all. So I would avoid that as well. And then what else would I say? Like try to wash anything new that you buy before you wear it. Also look for labels, Blue Sign and Okotex, Oekotex. Those are really good labels for making sure that the final product is non-toxic.
Are those an independent like clearinghouse or analysis?
Yeah, those are independent, private, voluntary labels.
Okay.
So they're not going to cover everything, but like you can find Okotex certified bedding and stuff from Bed Bath & Beyond, actually. And then you can go to ecocult.com and you can find lists of brands that have really strong chemical management programs as well. We have a whole shop sustainably page. You could check the little non-toxic box and it'll show you all the brands that we recommend. And yeah, I mean, those are a lot of different things that you can do. And I think combining those strategies will reduce your risk of exposure by a lot. Oh, and also, if you see the California label, you know, this is known to the state of California to have hazardous substances, believe it.
That's interesting. I do see that once in a while. Yeah. The other thing I know, some of us who shop in cities, people selling the kind of knockoff goods on the side of the road or Canal Street and in Lower Manhattan. It's not just the brand, the intellectual capital issue of it. They often are full of terrible chemicals.
Yes, absolutely. They often are. There's been tests of them and they found very high amounts of lead and phthalates, children's products as well. And so I visited the Newark Air and Marine Port to talk to customs and just ask them, you know, what are they doing? And they're not doing enough. It's not their fault. They don't have the mandate. They don't have the funds. But the one thing they always check is knockoffs, especially if they're children's knockoffs, because they're checking for lead, cadmium, and phthalates. And they often find those things in knockoff products. So I would 100% avoid the knockoffs. If you want to get a good deal, try to go to the Real or other secondhand stores to get the real thing.
So now we've mentioned ecocult.com a couple of times. You not only have the website, you have a subscription service there. What do we learn if we subscribe?
Yeah. So, well, I have a free newsletter that people can subscribe to. So I'm always sharing new research and new things that I'm finding in our articles, but we have a special membership for people who are concerned with health. And so all of our articles are fact-checked. They're the highest quality, latest research on hazardous chemicals in clothing and beauty products that you can find. We take our responsibility very, very seriously. And so if readers want to find good quality information to protect their and their family's health and reduce their exposure, reduce their reactions, it would be great if they could support our work by becoming a member of EcoCult.
I think this is such valuable work. I know a lot of responsibility does fall on our shoulders as consumers. But I know also in your book, you mentioned there are ways we can ask our representatives and our manufacturers and try to ask for more structural support in these issues. What's something we can do maybe this week or look into this week to try to help our families be safer?
That's such a great question, and I'm glad you asked. There are, we're already past Giving Tuesday, especially by the time this comes out. But if you're looking for a couple of good organizations to contribute to, there is Safer States. And I think they're going to make textiles their next big push. They've been very successful in getting state regulations around hazardous substances in consumer products through. And then also Toxic-Free Future. And that's another really good organization that's been working on this issue. They come out with reports, they test products, they really they lean on companies to do better. They lean on legislators to protect us. So those are two places you can contribute to or volunteer for. And then also ask your state legislator. I know federal government's big and wacky and dysfunctional right now, but states are doing a lot. So California and New York, the good news is that they've banned PFAS in everyday apparel and then performance apparel in 2025 and then 2028, respectively. And the more states that do this, the safer the rest of us are. And the closer we get to a federal standard that says you cannot have this in our apparel. So ask your state representative what they're doing to protect you and your family from hazardous chemicals, not just in clothing, but in toys and other consumer products.
There is so much more I could ask you. There is so much more just in your book, and your book's a couple years old now, right? What year did your book come out?
Actually, it's
this year?
It's from this year. Yeah,
it's this
yeah.
year.
It's from
Oh,
June.
good. How come? I guess I've been following you longer than your book was actually out. Maybe I was watching you before. But things are changing all the time. I'm sure all the details. So that's why we would want to come to ecocult.com. I don't want people to think that this is all bad news. I really want all the listeners to think that this is something we can educate ourselves about and be part of more of a solution. Even if we're not going to be able to solve anything that quickly, we can make some difference, and we can just be a little bit more aware, and especially notice when we're having these sorts of chronic issues that it's another thing to think about, another thing to be proactive about talking with our physicians and healthcare providers.
Yeah. And also, I would say, it's another way you can show care for your friends and family. There's a lot of people who react really strongly to scented laundry products. They're very sticky. They're around for a while. There's research showing, like, when you walk past a building and you can smell the dryer vent going, that is hazardous. That has carcinogenic substances in it. Those chemicals have combined to create new, fancy, terrible chemicals. And I think it's really a sense of care to understand the issue and stop using scented laundry products, so that if your friends, like I said, 1 in 5 people are sensitive to these chemicals and scented products, to stop using dryer sheets and scented laundry products and all of these things, and create also in your home a safe space for people who are sensitive, right? And don't use scented. There's an unscented Febreze that you can use that does just as good of a job without causing, reactions or harm to your family and friends, especially in the holiday season. What a gift it would be to the people around you to invite them over to your home and provide them with a place where, like, they're not coughing or wheezing or having their asthma kick up. So I think this is a wonderful issue to educate yourself on, so that or like you're not buying gifts for your family or your nieces and nephews or your kids that are causing them skin reactions. So I think, especially heading into the holiday season, becoming aware and thoughtful about what you bring into your home and what you gift to people, I think is a wonderful way to give back.
We're going to let that be the last word. Alden Wicker, thank you very much for joining us on Vedge Your Best.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle.
So, what did you think of Alden Wicker? I know it's a lot. And like many of the things, we can sometimes wish we didn't know, right? We can just think, oh, put your hands over your ears and blah, 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 blah. I didn't hear you. But if, like me, you actually kind of half knew this to be true, I hope you're going to feel ready to make a few changes this season in what you buy. Maybe you'll feel a little bit more supported in opting out of some of the choices you actually know aren't great for you and your family. You also may have more questions that you feel you can ask the manufacturers and the retailers, and actually we've never had more access to our retailers and manufacturers. You can, in most cases, just get on the Google and ask. The links for To Die For and Alden Wicker's website, ecocult.com, are going to be in the show notes, of course, as always. And you can sign up. And I recommend you do. You can sign up for a free newsletter at ecocult.com. Once a week, Alden sends out a curated best of in sustainable fashion, and that includes her take on fashion sustainability, whatever topics are out there, many of the latest articles by the people on the staff, and good reads from other trustworthy publications. And no, this is not all vegan, but I think this is super important information and compatible with the conscious choices many vegans are trying to make for ethical, environmental, and of course, health reasons. So I highly, highly recommend that you check it out. At least take a look at some of the research and some of the reporting. Super important. And if you find it as valuable as I do, you may even want to subscribe to the premium list on ecocult.com to help support the work Alden and her team are doing. Okay, kids, get out there. I know a lot of things are all converging at once on our calendars, but ultimately we do. We have a lot more control than it sometimes feels like. We can opt out of a lot of the frenzy. We can. We can, right? I'm asking for me. Okay. In the meantime, veg your best.
Veg Your Best podcast production, music, and editing by Charlie Weinshank. Thanks, Charlie. Before you go, it would mean so much to me and the Veg Your Best team if you would hit subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, or share with someone you think might be interested. Something about algorithms, it helps bump us up a little in the rankings, and that's the best way to help others find the podcast and for us to find our audience. So, until next week, make it easy and veg your best.